Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for bearing with us, giving us some grace as we handle some back end technical um, situations. You know how technology is. You never know what's going to happen. So we have pivoted and we worked it out and we are here. And again, we're just grateful that you all are attending and wanting to get this information. As you know, last month we had a really good workshop. We featured Mr. Joe Watkinson, who is the councilman here in Lexington, North Carolina. We talked about the road to entrepreneurship. He gave a lot of good advice. Prior to that, we had our career fair, we had our job fair with some local agencies and outside partners outside of Lexington as well. Again, just grateful that you all have been continuing to tune in, continue to get this information because me and Miss Sage are working hard and connecting and wanting to get some good people on the line for you. And those who are here, if you could say hello, let me know you're in the room just so I can kind of see who's here because you know how it is. We can't actually see your face, but we love for you to interact, leave a comment, say hi, letting us know you all here. As you all do that, I just want to, for those that may be here that are not used to who I am or know who I am Whitney Middlebrooks. I am the Family Self-Sufficiency Program Coordinator with the Lexington Housing Authority. And I'm over the FSS program, always looking to gain some new participants. We're really excited about launching some really good things before the end of the year. So definitely reach out to me if you're interested in joining. We are enrolling, so definitely do that. I have Miss Sage here, and we also have Dr. Cooke-Davis, who is here again. For those that remember last year, she was a part of our first initiation of our virtual learning workshop. So again, we're happy to have her. And again, if you have any questions as we going through this topic, we are going to talk about this is our Got Kids. This is about parenting with intention. If you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, just know this is a safe space. Dr. Cooke-Davis is, I'm sure, more than willing to stop if she needs to address or answer a question that someone may have. At the end of our workshops, as you all know, we will ask a question just to make sure you all are engaged, and we do have a prize giveaway that we'll be able to give to whoever answers that correct answer. So without further ado, I'm going to have Miss Sage speak, and then she will introduce our speaker this afternoon.
Hi, I'm Sage Chioma, and I am the program coordinator for B.O.S.S Initiative, which is building our success stories. And Whitney Middlebrooks and I, we meet here each month with presenters who can actually give you some knowledge, some skills, and information that you can put to use in your everyday life. We pride ourselves on that, not just having somebody lecture and it just be something that go right over your head, but there are things that you could put into your everyday practices. And parenting is way high on the list of people now who are being brought to the forefront to adjust to our new norm that we have encountered because of COVID. And so the kids are back in school, and that would mean the pressure is on and the pressure is high. So today we have an expert. We have with us today Miss Sebrina Cooke-Davis, Ph.D. Dr. Davis is a Parent Education Program Supervisor for Children's Home Society of North Carolina. She has 20 years of experience working with children and families in settings such as substance abuse treatment, hospitals, schools, community based organizations. Years of experience in working with children and families, and she has a passion for young people. And so I take the time right now to introduce Dr. Sebrina Cooke-Davis.
Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you all taking the time and lending listening ear today. This time from the last time we spoke is like, okay, we're still dealing with some of the same stuff. So I welcome the opportunity to circle back around and just sort of check the pulse of the parents and see how things are going, what's going on. So we're going to just spend a little bit of time today just sort of checking in and checking that pulse to see how things are going with your families and acknowledge that we are living through a shared traumatic experience as we deal with this pandemic that seems to be ongoing. I know many of us, present company included, are COVID tired. Our children are COVID tired. We're COVID fatigued. So I think anytime we can reach out and support each other as we deal with this ongoing trauma that we're dealing with is certainly going to be refreshing. And so I hope that we can share some time today, just sort of thinking about that and processing a little bit. So I'm going to have Whitney share a screen. I just have a few slides, not many, but just have a few slides that I'd like to share with some content that sort of help shape our conversation today.
Absolutely. Before we do that, I want to put this comment up from Miss Joya Wesley. She says she's happy to be here, even though she's not an actual parent. Neither am I. But guess what? We are here. We're all learning. We're growing, and we can
Yes.
always apply this information to our family, our nieces and nephews, and other children that we're working with. Whether it's in my FSS role, maybe with a parent and their child. So I'm able to still use these things in our everyday life and be able to grow, because that's the thing. We all want to make sure we're good and growing in skills and can apply these in various ways outside of just being a parent. So I just
Yes.
wanted to notate that. Thank you, Miss.
Welcome, Joya. Welcome. Glad to have you.
Yes, ma'am. So we're gonna go ahead and dive right into it.
So I think part of what helps shape us is the very first slide. I think it really helped put things in perspective for me as we try to swallow all that is the 5 by 5 rule. I think that, and Whitney, you can go to that slide so they can see it. If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes stressing about it. When we're trying to ingest all that we've been through, and I don't think any of us realized we would still be dealing with all this now, almost 2 years later. Really to put things in perspective, because if not, this whole life that we live right now can be overwhelming and it can suck you in pretty quickly. So really prioritize and put things in perspective. Challenge it by putting it to this 5 by 5 rule. If it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't stress about it more than 5 minutes. And share that with your children. Share it with your coworkers. Share it with your family, because like, as I said before, we're all going through this shared experience. So whether you have children or not, we're still all living in this pandemic, right? Whether you're working or not, whether you're retired or not, whether you have challenges with mental illness or not, whether you are dealing with addiction or not. This pandemic has swept through and impacted everyone. So that part about it gives us this shared experience that it has not been able to, none of us have been able to bypass this. In some form, shape, or fashion, we've all been impacted. So this 5 by 5 rule is the same. It transcends to everybody. If it's not going to matter in 5 years, let's not get our blood pressure up more than 5 minutes. Okay. Have that space and then say, okay, it's time to move on. Because it's totally irrelevant for the most part. If it's only going to take, if it's not going to matter 5 minutes, that's all the space I'm going to give it. And I'm going to move on to the next thing, because we all have to-do lists, right? So let's move on to the next thing on a to-do list. Let's move on to the next thing on my priority list, because I don't want to give this too much space. Okay, next. So parenting traps, as we, whether you have 2 kids, 3 kids, 0 kids, 2.1 kids, these traps actually, not just for parenting, but really for anyone who's working with children in some capacity or interfaces with children, it's very common to fall into certain traps. And I think even more so when you're stressed. And because all of us tend to be a little bit more stressed now because of the stressful times that we're living in, I think particularly with children going back to school, these are probably even going to be more common. So the first one I want to talk about is all their fault. Okay, so it's all the kids' fault. It's not my fault as the caregiver, parent, person at the church, worker with the children in the daycare. Is whoever the adult is, it is never my fault. It's the children's fault. It's never about me and how I can examine myself, but it's the kids. The kids did it. So that's the first trap we fall into. The second one is the martyr. So we flip that. The martyr person is the person who really, and I think mamas, y'all, we are really guilty of this. And a lot of these are very unconscious. So let me just throw that out there. These things are very subtle and, you don't even consciously know you're doing it. So let me just put that out there. It's not intentional. It's not that we intend to do these things or feel this way. The martyr is the person that takes all that they are and put it into parenting. Everything is about the parent. My role as parent. I forget the fact that I was Sebrina before I was a parent, that I was a friend before I was a parent, that I had hobbies, goals, dreams, desires, failures before I was a parent. So my whole world becomes basketball, football, soccer, Girl Scout. Everything becomes about how I am a parent. That's the martyr parent. Your whole world becomes a parent. And you all know there's danger in that, because then we get lost. We get lost. We lose ourselves. We lose sight of, who we were before we came in contact with these little people. My children are 17 and 19, and so they have their own lives. So I'm, basically empty nesting. I'd be in trouble, but if I didn't know who Sabrina was, because they surely know who they are, right? They're going on living their best lives. So that's the martyr parent, right? The negative parent is the parent that has a difficult time seeing the positive side of things. And there again, it's not intentional. I think, especially where we are now, it's very easy for us to go to the negative because we are struggling emotionally. We're struggling to look at positive things because there's death all around us. We are losing lives every day all around us. But the negative parent just sort of lives there, right? Doesn't have a bad day, but just sort of lives in that space. The leave them alone parent is the parent, I'll just leave it alone. It'll get better. I don't want to address this. I'm seeing that my child, is back into this learning environment now, maybe stressed out. I may be noticing some things, but if I just leave it alone, it'll get better. That denial. I don't really want to deal with this right now. And I get it because it's scary. It can be a little scary. The perfect parent is the parent where I want everything to be perfect. I'm the perfect parent. My children are perfect. Everything in my world is perfect. Just perfect. Everything has to be perfect. Okay. Then you've got the perfect child. My child is perfect. And what do you mean my child did this? I know, no, my child is absolutely perfect. And it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with the child. It has to do with the parent. Let me just put that out there for that one. Because we all know nobody's perfect. Okay. It's the impression that, everything is going right in my world. So that means that my child must always be that way, and that expectation is not going to be a realistic one, of course. Then the last one is, as a parent trap, it's all my fault. It's my fault that my child is not doing well in school. It's my fault that my child is struggling. It's my fault that my child is having difficulties with their social emotional development. That the parent that takes on all the weight of everything that's going on in that child's world. So these traps are really common traps. They're traps that probably every parent or caregiver or anybody who's come in touch with a child has probably fallen into one, if not multiple of these. They're not really given to you today to say, shame on you. They're given to educate, for you to kind of see what they are so you can be knowledgeable of what they are. So hopefully you can minimize, decrease, or totally avoid these if you can. And I think, given where we are, all of us are going to be in them at some point in time. The object is not to live in them, right? We can visit these traps sometimes because we are imperfect parents. We are imperfect, perfect parents, okay? So we can visit them for a while, but we don't need to live in these traps, because then the traps definitely overpower who we are as a parent and take away all the joy that we have with our parenting. And that's what we don't want. So these are simply to acknowledge today that these are some things that we need to be aware of. I don't care what age of your child. It doesn't matter if your child is special needs. It doesn't matter if your child is a straight A student. None of that matters. We all fall into these traps at some point in time if we're not really careful. So just want to acknowledge that we're all human, and these are just things that I want you to be aware of as important, so we can try to avoid these and minimize this type of interaction as much as we can with our parenting or caregiver relationship with our children. Okay, on to the next one. So, when we look at this, is just how we're going to, look at nurturing mental health. As you all know, we have seen a spike of anxiety, depression, symptoms, particularly with adolescents, children that may have never had any kind of sign of dealing with any of these issues now because of what we've been dealing with for the past 2 years. So it's going to be even increasingly important that we address these. We can look at things that we can do. These are pretty small, so you may not be able to see them as clearly, but some of them, I'll just name a few of them that I think are really important. Model forgiveness. I think children need to see us show ourselves grace. They need to see us show others grace, so they learn how to do that. Tell the truth. I think that's not just about your day to day. Teaching children, of course, is always to tell the truth. But when I'm speaking about in this is, let's be very what we call an askable parent. When children are coming to us to ask us very tough questions about the world that we live in, being honest and talking about what that looks like, given the context of that conversation. Children need to hear truth nowadays. And they've been through a lot, right? Our children are very resilient. And where it is age appropriate, they deserve information that they can ingest and then help them to process and deal with it. Be consistent with whatever you're talking about, or I'm a parent. I've never been one to make promises to my children other than to love them. Just because I'm human, I can't dictate what happens from one day to the next. So I always tell them, I don't make you any promises about anything other than loving you. That's what I can promise you I can do. But be consistent. Say what you mean what you say. Alongside that, being patient. Actively listening to your child before offering advice. Sometimes children are talking to us. They're not talking to us to get advice. They're talking to us just to get it out and process it, right? So just keep that in mind too, that they're not always trying to get advice from us. Being really careful about electronic time right now. I think a lot of our children have been so inundated with, thankfully they're back in school, but that therein lies a lot of stress for that, of course, having them back in the classroom. But it does hopefully limit a little bit of the electronic time that they've been having. So we do have time for them to reach out to us and socialize with us as a family. So reminders for everyone to be flexible. As parents, sometimes we can get, stuck in wanting things to be our way systematically. It has to be our way because we're the parent, but recognizing that is not always the case. We've got to be a listening ear to hear what our children are saying, to be able to help them process all this information. Be bold and be fierce in your parenting, though, and protecting your children and making sure that, particularly now, that their best interest is always at heart. Communicating with them, communicating with the school if you need to be, and just being present, just making sure that you're present. I think that children going back to school, of course, that has a heightened anxiety for you, has a heightened anxiety for them. So just acknowledging them, maybe carving out some time when you do get them, just to really make sure you're asking, how's their day? What's going on? How are you feeling today? This is very scary. I don't think a lot of kids will acknowledge that. But it's a scary thing to have to go back into school with all things given right now. So I just want to make sure we're raising socially and emotionally competent children. And the way we do that is we allow them to express themselves, to be able to talk about their emotions in a safe place. Okay, so the last slide. So we need to be able to recognize warning signs, I think, when our children could be in trouble. Particularly when we know right now that there is so much going on with the pandemic. And I mentioned anxiety and depressive disorders being on a rise with adolescents. Be aware of ongoing frustrations of children that may be heightened. more so than usual. If you have an adolescent like I do, they seem to always be frustrated about something, and they're always embarrassed about something, and their temper is typically pretty short. So let me just say that a lot of these things you see up here on the screen, they're pretty typical of adolescent behavior. Okay. But what we see is if it's a pattern, if it's ongoing, if it seems to be impacting their day-to-day relationships, make sure that you are acknowledging that. If they're having feelings of hopelessness, or not being able to control emotions or feelings, and flat out if they articulate it. If a child tells you, I'm having issues with, don't minimize it. Acknowledge it. Talk to them about it. I think, sometimes, especially for girls, we are typically said to be dramatic, right? We're drama queens. We're little drama mamas. And so, but really, I think particularly now, we want to listen to that. Don't minimize it if a child is talking to you about certain things. I know personally, my own daughter has talked about some anxiety as of late, and she's never been a child who's had issues with anxiety. And but she has, I think, going back to school during the pandemic has heightened that, and she's emotionally aware enough to know that I've seen some changes, mama, I need to talk about this. So if a child is saying those things, don't minimize it. Talk to them about it and give them a space. If you need to have someone else intervene as well, open up that space for that. And also normalize all these emotions I just mentioned. Make it normal, because when kids see that, what, so what, you're anxious, who's not anxious? Everybody's anxious. You're not alone in this. You have no reason to be ashamed about this. Let's talk about why you're anxious. Let's look at some deep breathing. Let's talk about mindfulness. Let's talk about how do we get you to connect to this emotion that you're feeling. Do you know why you're feeling anxious? Can you tell me a little bit about that? Could it be something? I know with my daughter, we've talked about something physical that she can take with her to school to help ground her while she's there during the school day. She really likes rose quartz, and she's into, crystals. And so for her, it may be you take rose quartz with you to help you during the school day. So we've talked about how do we keep you grounded and rooted when you're feeling yourself get anxious during the day. Physical things might be, for my son, it was a stress ball. He had a little basketball that was a stress ball that he would take with him, and when he felt anxious, he'd take that ball throughout the day and squeeze it. So learning what your child's needs are is going to be really important, and then attending to those to try to make sure that they get that I'm listening to you, I hear you, and if you can't figure that out, there are plenty of people out there that can help your child figure that out. But we don't want any of our children to suffer in silence. So if there's something going on, encourage them to talk to you about it, and then normalize it. This is perfectly normal. We can figure this out. That's going to be really important, I think, right now, because we are really trying to get children and parents and families, communities through a very difficult time that we've never seen before. So that means we got to do stuff we may have never done before. So that we got to step outside of our box, of our comfort zone, and make sure that we are helping our community move towards healing and recovery so we can see the other side of this pandemic. That's going to be really important in how we look at long-term trajectory for our families. So I hope this all made sense to you today. I hope it was helpful and beneficial to you with your families today. And I will throw it back over to Whitney and Sage.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put this comment up. This is actually my sister. Hello, sister. She said that was good stuff, just good information, and I hope she doesn't mind. But I want to share that you mentioned something about the crystal. So my nephew, I believe he's in the 4th grade, 3rd grade. I don't know. It's one of them grades. And so going back to school, so my sister's into crystals and things like that. And so I believe she gave him a tiger's eye necklace, which actually it represents like helping reduce anxiety or types of fears. And I believe she told him to touch it, maybe. So I appreciate that you is saying that your daughter was going that way. And so I just wanted to point that out, that there are so many different tangible thing you could kind of give your kid as a reminder or some type of comforting thing to let them know that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really good. And my mom put, you listen. So it is important to listen to your children. Um, what are they saying to you? Because sometimes they're clearly saying, this is what I'm feeling. And oftentimes
Mhm.
adults things to be like, okay. So I appreciate you just reiterating, listen to your kids because
Yeah.
they're telling you something for a reason. Don't minimize it, normalize also their feelings behind something because that it could be a lot of it can really help. And so you being aware of it is really good. So
And
uh,
actively listen. I think we and I'm guilty of it too. Passively listen sometimes, but she'll finish up and I'm like, now what did she just say? What did she just tell me? I may be in the kitchen cooking or something, and I'm like, that went right over my head. So if I'm actively listening, I can go back and say, now let me make sure I understand what you told me. You said you were feeling X, Y, and Z. So if you can't repeat what somebody just told you, you're not actively listening.
yeah.
Okay. So that's always your litmus test to, am I really tuned in to who is talking to me? Right? Because if you can't paraphrase it and repeat it back where it makes sense, you checked out.
Mm-hmm.
You checked out somewhere, and that's fine, but because it happens, we all do it.
Mm-hmm.
But you just want to make sure you're actively listening, for sure, because you otherwise you've missed the message. You've
Mm-hmm.
missed the message. And sometimes for children, they don't want to repeat the message. Like, I've given it to you one time, you didn't listen, I'm not repeating it again. So, and then
Yeah.
the barriers or the hurdles. I know when I was trying to process, my daughter, I said, Kayla, we need to call the doctor and let's just see what's going on. That was frustrating for her. So that's why I said that whole air, that title of frustration that was on there, she was just like, you know what, mommy, I'll just deal with it myself. And I said, no, that's not the way that
Mm-hmm.
works. We're going to deal with this together. I know you're frustrated, but you have to realize. So my whole, that modeling of forgiveness that I talked about, sweetie, do you realize what doctors' offices are dealing with right now? Do you
Mm-hmm.
understand? It was frustrating for me because I'm trying to call to get an appointment and get information from my child. I had to check myself and say, do you realize what these doctors' offices are dealing with right now? They
Yeah.
have COVID tests. They've got, it is just nuts. And so, I said, Kayla, keep that in mind. They have a lot that they're dealing with right now. So let us try to be patient, give
Mm-hmm.
it a few more days, and then I'll follow up. So it's that modeling. I had to show her, even though I was impatient, she was impatient. I had to show her, we've got to have a little bit of grace over here because they're dealing with stuff that we cannot even begin to imagine. So they'll get back with us and I'll follow up, and we need to exercise some grace there. So that was just a perfect example of how we have to model and show forgiveness and grace, because it's a lot, and I recognize that. But it is frustrating. It is very frustrating.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I really appreciate you giving us that example. And then also, what really stood out to me is when you said about anxiety and the depression that we have seen spike, and your suggestion on how to address it is something I wholeheartedly advocate for. And that is letting them know that it's an appropriate response to some of the things that you have been dealing with, as opposed to freaking out, because we freak out. My child has depression, my child has anxiety. Well, most adults aren't dealing with this very well, and kids don't have the ability to express how much it's weighing on them. So they act it out. So when you said, and I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit. Raising socially, emotionally competent children, because I know I've worked as a counselor, and adults would learn through counseling how to identify and verbalize feelings for the first time in their life. They're used to either sucking it, just suck it up and handle it, or just numb, like I'm just going to shut down, or maybe exploding. So by the time they explode, they don't know you weren't really angry, you were hurt, you were disappointed. So could you elaborate on emotionally competent children? Because you said listening to them. And that's what Whitney's
Yeah.
mom said too.
Yeah, teaching them how to label their feelings, so that helps build socially emotionally competent children. When you make them label it, make them put a label on it. Tell me what that is that you're feeling. So to your point, Sage, they're not bottling it up and then it comes out as anger, but it's really frustration, or it could be embarrassment or shame or guilt. Make them label it, make them put a name and a label on it, so there then we can address it. Because if I don't know what it is, I can't deal with it, I can't address it. So make them label it, make them, talk them through it, give them some ideas. Now, are you feeling this way? Is this how you feeling? You may have to help coach them through it, because they may not even know what the definition of it is. They just know how I feel, and I don't really know what you call that, but that's the way I'm feeling. So it may be that you have to help coach them through it. But the way you get them through it is you keep picking. You dig at it. You probe at it. And finally you can say, oh, you're feeling this way, but do you know what that is? Okay, it sounds like you're this. Okay, so when they get a label on it, if it comes back around again, then they can say, oh, I remember I felt that way when this happened. That's what this is. Okay. Oh, and guess what? I'm noticing my best friend is having the same stuff, because being socially and emotionally competent ain't just about yourself. It's also about recognizing feelings in other people. Because when you recognize stuff in other people, you know how to handle people better. So when you address people from that trauma-informed lens that we talked about earlier, and stop asking people why you did this, why you did that, and say, do you mind telling me what happened? Can you tell me a little bit more about what happened today that made you behave this way? Then you get to the root of what's really going on. That's really trauma informed. It takes the blame off of what the person is doing. It makes you acknowledge that the person did what they did for a reason. So that's really what I'm trying to get to the root of. Little Johnny might be acting out in school today, not because little Johnny just wants to act out in school, but because little Johnny may have witnessed something at home before he got to school. So when little Johnny gets there, I'm not asking him, why are you late to school today, little Johnny? I'm saying, little Johnny, is there a reason why you were late to school today? You see how that framing changes? Then little Johnny can sit down and talk to me and say, well, you know what, Miss Sabrina? Well, before I got here, my mom and daddy had a big argument and it got really bad. And I can say, okay, baby, well, let's talk a little bit about that. You want to talk about that? So then I'm taking that off of the reason why he was late is because he was just walking into my classroom late. No, it's something else to that. So
or it could be transportation,
yes,
anything.
it
Yes.
could have been any number of things, but it's up to me as the adult to frame the question so I can really get to the root of why he was late. Because usually it's more than just what I'm seeing anyway. So that trauma-informed approach is a way we can address our children like that too. So that helps build that social emotional competence. So you didn't do well in school. Okay, well, tell me a little bit about why you're not doing well in school. What's happening? Are you having some issues with your teachers? Is something going on to distract you? I'm not going straight to the point that you're just not doing your work. Okay, well, there's a reason why. Are you distracted at school? Or are you not able to do your homework once you get home? Because what's happening with your environment when you get there? Let's talk a little bit about that so then I can help figure that out. So when you allow children the space to be more emotionally and socially competent, then you can get more out of them. That's when you're building that for adulthood. So we're priming them now to be able to have those conversations, especially for our young men, especially because the only emotion we allow them to express is anger. If it ain't anger, then they ain't manly.
Absolutely. And
It
I
is,
like the anxiety piece. I know that anxiety is often fear of the future. And most adults, because of the uncertainty that we all find ourselves in this shared experience, it's quite natural. A child has a much longer road ahead of them than me. So they are having some anxiety around that. Could you speak to resilience?
Yes.
Because you did mention that. I
Yes.
took my notes because this is why we call in the experts. Ain't that right, Miss Whitney? Me and her be learning right along with everybody else.
Yeah, well, you know, and that's to me, that's the beauty in this whole pandemic. That's what the beauty is. The beauty is that we are able to stretch. We're being made to stretch, and when you're made to stretch, you can see just how much stretching you can take and how much you can bounce back. But when you don't exercise that thing, you don't realize how much you got in you. So with resiliency, that's just what that is. It's able to bounce back in times of adversity. And you cannot build those skills if you don't have anything to help you build them. So you have to have dealt with something in order for you to get to that point of resiliency. What we know about children is that theirs is shaped by family, home, school. Those three areas shape a child's resiliency: family, home, and school. So, how adults deal with children in those very critical, stressful situations, that's what determines how they're going to be as adults with resiliency. So, we're doing this now during a pandemic. They could not get any more resiliency testing than what they're getting right now. Because, I mean, really, no, none of us can. But certainly for these, baby, this is a time for them to really sit in how, if I can overcome this, I can do anything. Ain't nothing I can't do. I missed my son missed his whole senior year almost, during the pandemic. I said, son, if you can overcome this, you can do anything. So it's that stretching of, but those three areas help to shape resiliency. And what we know about resiliency and what we know about children that can overcome things, the one thing that we know is true about it, that's common amongst all resiliency studies, is that they have one caring adult. One, just one. If they got one adult that loves them unconditionally, that provides nurturing, stable environments, most people can overcome just about anything. Just about anything. One person. So we can get us a whole village, then we really doing something. We can get us a whole village of people who are nurturing, loving, and caring. Then we can shape and build resilient children that way. If they're feeling it at home, if they're feeling it when they go to the Y, if they're feeling it when they're out when in the community, in sports, if they're feeling it when they're at church, if they're feeling it when they get to the schoolhouse and the teacher's doing it, if everybody's speaking that same language, then that child is wrapped in resiliency. And we know resiliency is a protective factor. When children are more resilient, they tend to do better. They bounce back. They have better relationships. They tend to do better in school. They tend to be able to be productive in what they decide to do once they get out of school. So resilient people tend to just do better. When in all matter, walk, shape, and life, they do better because they're able to adjust. They're able to pivot. They're able to take the hit. They're able to get the rejection from the job and say, okay, you know what? I can keep right on moving. They're able to let that toxic relationship go. 9 times out of 10, they ain't even starting a toxic relationship to begin with because they already know that's not a good look for me. So most of the time when people are resilient, they tend to be able to take a hit and get back on the horse and keep going. That's why it's so important. But it's not something that we're born with. Resiliency is taught. So it's our responsibility to build and nurture that in children. And this is a prime time for it. We're at the best place in our lives to build resilient children, for sure.
I appreciate that answer. I got so much more than I anticipated because I see resiliency from that one caring person, but you broadened it and put it in the context of where we find ourselves now. You gave us so much. I mean, so much more than the first time that you were here, and it's all just so right on time. It really
I
is.
hope
It's right
so.
on time because I find that parents are the least amount to be supported, but the first ones to take the hit as far as judgment and criticism.
Absolutely.
And
And
that's why I
parenting
have
is so isolating.
a passion for parents being linked to resources and even learning how to support each other.
Yes,
because a lot of them are going through the same stuff,
that's
but
right.
they don't know because, like you said, they might be the martyr. They so in
There
it
you go.
that they can't even look up to see that the person right alongside you, uh, your kids are having some of the same issues come up.
Mhm. And
So
parenting
that
is very isolating. So I'm glad you brought that up, Sage. For as much as we are going through a shared experience, it is also very isolating. Because we have been forced to be away from sometimes our support systems. And so it's been even more difficult, I think, during this pandemic. So to make sure that families are connected to like-minded families, so they feel like they have some support, is going to be really important right now. So figuring out who is my village, who do I talk to when I really need to process something that's going on with my children or child, that's going to be really important right now. So parents don't feel like they're alone.
I think this is all good information. I think that everything it just all came together, just being a supportive, being open-minded, being flexible. I love when you said put a label on it. I think that was really good. Even for parents, sometimes adults are not always clear of what we're feeling either. So sometimes what is it? Let's put a label on it.
That's right.
And I think even showing that transparency with the child to let them know, like, mommy's not perfect, dad's not perfect, but I'm here for you and I want to be able to help you with these certain skills and so that you can be great, and go into life and be great. So if we don't have any questions for any people that are still viewing, if you have a question or comment, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm not sure if we actually have anyone from the Lexington Housing Authority on the line right now. But if not, I mean, do you want to ask the question to see where we're at? Just in terms of engagement.
Am I on mute?
No?
Okay. Okay. So the question would be, can someone sort of paraphrase the 5 by 5 rule? Doesn't have to be word about, word for word.
That was in the very beginning when we'll give a couple minutes to see if people get it. So if you could ask the question one more time.
Okay, can someone tell us and put it in their own words, what is the 5 by 5 rule?
I like that so much that I said, "Oh my gosh, I missed this because I know you told us the last time, but this time it really stuck with me." I'm not gonna say, ah,
There we go. There you go. That's it. That's it,
All
Miss
right.
Wesley.
You said if it won't matter in 5 years, so spend more than 5 minutes worrying about it. That's awesome. Awesome. Well,
thank you, Joy and Wesley.
thank you, Miss Wesley. We do have something I could give you as a giveaway. If you, Miss Wesley, would please actually message the Lexington Housing Authority's Facebook page with an email and a phone number so that I can reach you, and then I'll connect with you later so I can get that to you. Are you local? Just I mean, I'm not even sure where you are. That can get kind of tricky. So let me know where you are. Just send me a message. I can get that directly on the Housing Authorities page. But that was good. So anything anybody wants to add or in closing, any thoughts, final thoughts? No?
I would just say to parents, just hang in there. I know it's hard work, what we're doing right now, parenting in a pandemic, but just hang in there and to give yourself grace, to give your children grace, and to utilize your resources that are available in your community. Don't feel like you are parenting on an island, because you are not. You have people around you that want you to be successful during this difficult time, but reach out to your community resources as well, to make sure that you are getting what you need for your family during this very difficult time. And the fact that, I would acknowledge that you're doing a great job. You know, we're hanging in here, we're doing it, we're getting these kids. Hey, if we're able to get them up, get them out the door, we have to celebrate the small wins. So take time to make sure we're doing that too, in line with the 5x5. Hey, if it's not gonna matter, just keep it in mind. We're just trying to get our kids out the door in the morning to school. Just acknowledge the small things that are going to be really important, because at the end of the day, that's really what matters.
Awesome. Well, that is a good note to end on. Again, thanks everyone. Miss Wesley, I have sent you a message. We're gonna be back here next month. This is what me and Sage do. We want to bring some good content that make you grow, expand your mind, and keep it lighthearted as well, to just so that we can connect. Please keep in mind that we'll be announcing the next community job fair. We don't have the date. We had to reschedule due to weather. So we will be putting that back up. So please stay posted on our Facebook. And if you're on our email list, we definitely want to get that information, because we have some great employers that are having some wonderful incentives too, with these signing bonuses, some really good benefits. Because we always know, if you're in the FSS program, one of the goals is you need to have a job. So definitely stay connected in that way. Sage, did you want to add any thoughts before we?
Oh, I just want to always give kudos to my partner here, Miss Whitney Middlebrooks, the tech savvy coordinator of family self sufficiency. And Dr. Davis, you just definitely knocked it out of the park today. I am so proud to have you doing that work with the parents in our community. And I definitely will stay in touch.
Thank you so
Awesome.
much for having me.
Mhm.
Awesome. Well, we will see you all next month. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Bye bye.
Bye, y'all. Be safe.